Welcome everybody to February's CleveSec meeting. If you didn't get any pizza, there's still some left. I apologize if we run out because the order got messed up a little bit. We were expecting a little bit more pizza, but there's still enough. And with that being said, let's get started. First, like always, thank you for coming. CleveSec, of course, depends on all the community to even exist. So we truly appreciate the support and participation, and we especially appreciate your attendance here tonight, even though we record all the sessions, because we always have a lot of discussion and a lot of networking, and it's really awesome. We do have just 3 rules, and the first and probably most second famous, I'd say. Don't be a dick. We are all here to share our stories and what we've learned and our passions and everything that we do on the job and can transmit to others to make their jobs easier as well. At the same time, don't take yourself too seriously. We're still here to have fun and to engage in community events with everybody else, to get to know each other beyond just your job title and what you do. And number 3, and probably the most famous rule, if tonight is your first night at CleveSec, you have to come up here and say your name and answer the following question. But before we get there, just a few quick reminders of where you can find CleveSec related information and point others to find CleveSec information. First and foremost, Twitter is our main hub of communication. You can always follow at CleveSec. We will retweet stuff that's relevant to the Cleveland community, be it jobs or projects or any questions or anything like that. You can use the hashtag CleveSec to do that yourself. If you don't want to wait for us to see it and retweet it, you can share something that you're working with, ask something, ask for help. I've actually used it to ask some questions pertaining to stuff that I was working on at the time, and got replies very quickly. That helped me finish my work. So. Meetup.com is where we post our meeting dates and the descriptions of the talks and the upcoming speakers. It's also where you can find the precise dates for the community night events. But the rule of thumb is these meetings with the speakers is always the second Tuesday of the month, and the community nights, which are more relaxed evening, usually for like a pub night or movie night or something like that, is the last Tuesday of the month. We do have a LinkedIn group. Not much gets done in there. It's just there because LinkedIn. CleveSec@gmail.com is where you can send private messages if you want to discuss some sort of idea, or you don't want to, for whatever reason, post something publicly on Twitter. If you have an idea for a talk, for example, but you want to flesh it out with us, get some help with that, you can always use CleveSec@gmail.com. And finally, YouTube /CleveSec is where we post the videos of every second Tuesday of the month. So today we're recording and we're going to post the recorded meeting up there, usually within the week. So again, I'll say this is a community effort. We really appreciate everyone coming. We are always trying to branch out because Twitter is excellent for reaching all of the InfoSec professionals and all that, but we want to bring also developers and teachers and students who might be interested in information security so that they can develop better, test better, learn about InfoSec, because there's not a lot of programs out there to learn about this stuff and all that. So as much as you can, please spread the word so that we can sort of break out of the echo chamber. Always submit your ideas for talks. We have quite a few months ahead, already scheduled for speakers, but we're always accepting ideas for future talks. So if you have a project that you want to work on, maybe polish it out a little bit, but that you think you could present, by all means, come to us and tell us about it. It could be anywhere from a few minutes to an entire hour. So that's that. Tonight's agenda, first we have the Habits of Effective Security Managers by Clymer and Jack Nichelson. They're going to talk about what effective managers do. And the domain name system, we're going to understand what DNS is, how to not let it bite you in the rear. And it's time for the first timers. So, like I said, just come up. If this is your first time at CleveSec, I'll pass you the mic. You can tell us your name. You can tell us anything else about you if you want. And then answer who is the best, Batman or Bruce Wayne, in your opinion.
I'm Neil Nancy, work over at Hurricane Labs. I think Michael Keaton, definitely the best Batman, and I will throw batarangs at you if you disagree.
My name is Steve Kopchak, and I know I'm going to sound like a hipster, but I think Christian Bale is the best Batman.
My name is Chris Sanic. I work at Progressive Insurance. I don't really like any of the cinematic Batman.
This is Jack Nichelson, and I support that. Batman the Animated Series.
Yeah!
Chris Clymer. I'm going to go Michael Keaton, but only in the first Batman. I think it's all downhill from the second one on.
All right, excellent. Round of applause for our first timers. Very good. Okay, that's all I had for now. We're going to take a 5-minute break, grab some water, grab some pizza. The restrooms are just up the hallway, and then we'll get set up for our first talk. Okay, good to go.
All right, so I'm Chris, this is Jack. We're here to talk about how to secure things and influence people. 10 critical habits of effective security managers. And what we're going to get into, is really kind of what Jack and I have been working on about the past 6 months here. Kind of lessons that we've pulled out of all these different people that we've worked with, trying to figure out good ways to basically get stuff done. So I know everybody here's got different roles that they have within security or within other areas in IT. So I think a lot of what we're going to talk about tonight, look at it as if you're trying to get stuff done in your organization, whether it's here at Highland, whether it's someplace else, how are you influencing the people around you? How are you trying to motivate them to help you with a project you're trying to get pushed forward, help you fix a security problem you've identified? I mean, all of us in security always have those things we're trying to solve. So while we set this up as kind of this how to be a security manager presentation, as we were talking a little while ago, almost everything in here, it's really true for everybody in security and almost anybody anywhere. We've just kind of honed in a little bit on the security space. So how do you get other people to help you get stuff done? So kind of walking through an introduction, a little bit more about why are we here and why do we do this in the first place. So for me, this kind of started with a move out of consulting and into what I call the real world of actually being in the same job every day. Jack was actually one of my clients back when I was Secure State, and he liked to call me a seagull, right? I would fly in with a bunch of really great reports and a list of problems and crap all over his security program, and then fly back off and leave Jack with a big pile of crap to deal with.
Fly in, shit all over everything I was doing, make a lot of noise, and then leave. He was good at it.
I come back a year later, Jack, you're still covered in shit. I don't understand. I told you where all of it is. I measured it. I color-coded it for you. How have you not cleaned it all up yet? I started to think, well, well, maybe there's a little more to this stuff than just coming up with a list of problems. Maybe there's a little more that goes into trying to get this stuff fixed, and there's a reason why all the clients I would work with, even ones who are very sharp, and in a year's time, they would struggle to get all these security things done. So I made a leap into a regular corporate job, a non-consulting job, to be stuck with the seagull crap and see it through. To me, this presentation was a big part of me trying to figure out, well, how do I do that? And a little bit on that, for those of you who don't know me, as I mentioned, I worked at Secure State for 4 years, ran a consulting practice there, kind of an outsourced security officer for some of our clients there. Used to be on the board of the InfoSec Forum here across town, and used to run a podcast. And before that, worked for National City PNC. So I've been kicking around security for, I think, about 10 years now, IT for about 20. Nichelson?
I guess I can take that. So I've been doing IT for 20 years. I've been in this for a long time. I get to have a lot of fun with it. The big accomplishment that I'm very proud of is the Baldwin Wallace CCDC team took first place in state on Friday. That's big news. I'm one of the advisors, so I'm pretty proud of the team. And I'm looking forward to talking to you guys about leadership and how you get stuff done and how you move through the shit.
And before we dive too far into kind of what we want to talk about, we'd be remiss if we didn't kind of acknowledge there's a whole group of people that really are the content of this presentation. So this isn't Chris and Jack who sat around and said, what do we think are a bunch of good ideas to us? Over a period of time getting this presentation together, we met with a lot of folks from around town here, people we've worked with, people who've been our mentors, and asked them questions about how have you gotten stuff done in your organizations? What's worked for you? And a lot of common points started to come to mind, and that's really what this presentation came from.
So the reason that we led with this slide, instead of just putting it the thank you, hey, thanks, these guys helped. The reason we put this at the beginning is this is where you all need to start. You all have problems and challenges. You all have strengths and weaknesses. And your ability to use your network, grow your network, find mentors, find people who are successful at something that you're not, and emulate them or ask for help is where you need to start. Chris and I aren't trying to tell you how great we are. We're trying to share the stories of the challenges and the problems we had and the journey we took, so hopefully you guys can emulate that and carry it on and have the same successes that we've had. So that's really why we wanted to put this forward. And I can see a lot of you guys, you're younger than me, you're starting out in your career. I can't tell you how important mentors are, how important building those relationships are, getting help, building your network. It's invaluable for your growth. And that self-reflection of kind of being honest with yourself on where you're weak and where you need help, and being willing to kind of raise your hand and tell someone and be a little vulnerable and be like, oh, I'm not so good at this. It's hard to say, I'm not so good at this, but it is the most important thing that you can do for your career, not just professionally, but also personally. A lot of the things that we found in here when we talked to these people, the stuff that they shared with us, it wasn't just applied for work. It also applies for personal. And that whole work-life balance, that they're two different things, that's a bunch of crap. We're all in IT. They're the same. It's just two different buckets of time, but the way you live at work is the way you live at home, and if you're having a bad day at home, you're going to have a bad day at work. So you need to be able to transition and take this stuff throughout your life. I think it's here. The 10 habits. I give you the 10 habits. So, listening. This is one that I really suck at. I love to talk. I love to suck the air out of a room. I love to feel important. That's a problem that I had. People would come to me. They'd start to tell me what they needed to tell me. I'd jump to the conclusion, and I was really providing them no value. And listening is so important. When people stop bringing you their problems you stop leading. And a lot of this comes from your own ego. You think you know the answer, you think you know their problem, you think you understand their point of view or their perspective, but if you don't take the time to really open yourself up and listen, and there's the thing, active listening, are you asking questions, are you repeating back what they've said, but a lot of that sometimes is leading, or sometimes you're kind of directing the conversation. You need to kind of make more open-ended kind of questions. You need to let them fully tell you their story, then before you provide that. It's very important. This listening thing really is where everything starts from. This is how you make the connection with other people. So this talk was really focused for managers, leading teams, but this applies to everybody. This is the skill that really helped me become a manager. I had to first be able to talk to my customers, talk to my peers, and start to build relationships. So I'm losing my track here. So it's been a while since I've given this presentation. You need to start with listening so you can make a connection with people, so you can really understand their problem before you give them the answer. This is how you're going to start to build the relationships. And the relationships that you have with others are how you're going to be able to start to move things forward. You're kind of making that investment into that bank so that when you need their help, you've got a connection with them. And there's a great quote that somebody shared with me: no one cares how much you know until they know how much you care. So you first have to understand their point of view, their perspective, and their problem before you give them a new answer or solution, so they know and they relate to what the problem is. Positivity. This is one that I got pretty easy. A lot of times you'll find that things go south. And staying positive through it and projecting that positivity while you're working through problems is so key. And we get deflated. It happens to everybody. It sounds kind of corny, oh, I'm going to stay positive, I'm going to keep a good face on. Man, does it have a big difference. You've all seen this. You've worked with people who every little thing, they throw up their hands, oh, this sucks, oh, everything sucks. That's not fun. You don't want to work with them. You don't get energized. You know, they're bringing down the team. They're not, you've got to think about that from yourself too. When you get negative, it kind of draws other people down, or people start to move away from you. So now it's harder for you to move things forward. So when people come to you, try to take your time, listen to their problem, you stay positive, you try to address the problem in a positive way, and you try to keep that momentum going. So where Chris was saying at the beginning, he would come into my organization, give me a lot of problems, I've got all this fear. I now try to go out in my organization to induce change. I'm trying to be a change agent, and I'm just taking this message of fear and negativity. I'm not going anywhere. But if I sit down and I kind of go, okay, what are your objectives? What are your problems? What are your challenges? And then I link that to what my goals are, and then I'm positive on how we're going to move through it, we're able to make change. There's a great book called Leading Change, and there's 8 steps to doing that. And this is kind of, this whole presentation is linked off of some really key books that I've followed quite a bit and found to be very successful. And I'm sure in your careers, as you're trying to get stuff done, you have to get other people around you to move forward. And that's that being a change agent, leading change, getting things done. And this positivity of making things happen really makes a difference. So one of the things that I had was, Chris ran a scan, he found, 600 vulnerabilities on a server one year, and I was just like, oh, great, I'm going to take this over to that server team. You guys suck. Fix all 600 of these vulnerabilities, I'll be back next week. I wasn't really positive about it. I didn't take the time to listen to their point of view, understand what their challenges were, what's really going on. And I said, I made them a 0. I made them feel bad. I made them, no, this sucks. I hate this guy. Instead, next year, the following year, now I have 1,200 vulnerabilities. I went over to them and I'm like, tell me about what's going on. how do you guys manage the servers? What are the challenges? What do you guys do? What do you guys do with patching? I want to understand your world. And then I'm like, really? How do you think we can solve this problem? Because they knew the challenges. So I started to ask them, how could we solve the problem? What can we do? What works within your constraints? I kept it positive. I never went with, oh my God, that server's missing 1,200 patches. I was like, oh, okay, what can we do? How can we make this happen? All right, so you only get this much time, and you have this short of window. You know what, let me go to your manager. I'm going to get you 5 hours a week to concentrate on security. We're going to set up a patching window for you, and I'm only going to give you as many patches as it's going to take the time for the window you have. So I'm not now setting them up for failure to try to do 1,200 patches in their limited window. I'm going to set them up to be successful, and I'm only going to give them the amount of work that they can do within the agreed amount of time that's already been approved by their leadership. So now I've set them up to be successful. So then, when I go to their manager the following month and I'm like, hey, your guys, they did it. They got done what they said they'd get done, and they did it in the time they said they'd get done, and but look, we've moved the ball forward. They're doing a great job. They're hearing that their manager's being told they're doing good, and they're like, all right. Once you give somebody, once you get them to a point where they can earn that A, and they earn it, they'll fight like hell to keep it. So you just start slowly turning it up, giving them a little bit more, and they'll just keep working harder and harder to keep it. But if you don't take that time to first understand their point of view, keep positive in how you present it, and try to work in a more of a systematic view of the problem, not just, I need to ram patches into that server and why aren't you doing it? You're not going to get there. Now this is a very kind of security focus, but this applies into everything you do. A lot of people think in an A and B kind of thing. They're like, oh, I can only do this. Oh, you have to do this. If you get together, you listen, come at a perspective, positive way, and come up with a third option that really kind of makes both parties very happy. So the know your stakeholders. This is a point that goes to listening and staying positive and understanding the people who matter, the people who have the need, understanding what their values are, what their needs are, what their motivations are, and working more on the right stuff and not just good stuff. This was a classic problem that I had, is I would run 100 miles an hour at a lot of good stuff. Everyone would agree that's good stuff. But the stakeholders, they're like, oh, that's good. That really doesn't do a lot of value for me. I'm glad you did it, but you're not really working on the right stuff. You gotta take the time, you gotta understand their needs, their drivers, what's going on, where's the perspective, and start to direct your energy and your focus to what's really generating value to your stakeholders. This is a common problem that I see in IT that I did all the time. There's such a target-rich environment. There's so many things to do and to be done. There's a lot of opportunity. But prioritizing it, but not just prioritizing it in your mind, prioritizing it with your stakeholders and understanding what their needs are, so that way now you're focusing more of your time and energy on the right stuff. And then what you'll find is when you go out and you start trying to partner with other groups and other people, when you now have that better alignment to the higher value of the stakeholders, you'll get more momentum behind you and more people will come and help and get behind that. So now, instead of a lot of people kind of running in different directions, you can get people to start marching in the same direction.
Check. One of the things I know we talked about that this one always makes me think of is PCI compliance. Right? So when Jack's at Graph Tech and he's first getting the program rolling, one of the things we talk about is I can't get anybody to care about PCI. I keep like beating them up over it. There's all these things I think we ought to be doing to meet PCI compliance, and nobody seems to care. And we kind of talk it through, like, well, how much credit card volume do you have? Not a whole lot. What's the maximum fine PCI would charge you? You know, and it's a couple $100,000, whatever it was. It seems like a lot of money. And the next question is, right? you got an enterprise risk guy. What's his lowest threshold for whether the senior executives give a crap? And it's like, you know, $1 million, $2 million. So his executives basically said with that system, I don't give a crap about PCI. They're ignoring PCI, rightfully so. They should make sure they're complying. Yeah, you got to follow the rules. But at the other day, that's well under the threshold of stuff they give a crap about. There's plenty of things they need to worry about. And then we start talking about intellectual property. Like, what are you doing about that? Oh, I've been looking at PCI. Well, what's your intellectual property worth? Billions of dollars. Where does it sit? On this server that nobody ever spends any time on. All right, well, maybe you should look at that. And suddenly, people care a lot more about what Jack's doing when he said, I got a few $1 billion here. I got 80% of the company's revenue in my hand. Can you help me protect it?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great example of, I had a good thing, PCI. And let's be honest, it was an easy thing. I got a checklist, I got an audit. That's an easy thing to run after. I know what to do, and I know how to know if I've done it. Protecting intellectual property, oh man, that's a tough one. That's kind of a nebulous, well, what does that mean? That's kind of big. You know, there's a lot of ways to slice it. So there's this technique called, there's a sales technique called Sandler's sales technique. This is how the sales guys come in to get to the nugget of what's going to make you buy or not buy. This is the process that I would use with my execs. So if you go to a stakeholder and you start to have a conversation, well, they're going to give you a broad statement like, oh, go protect IP. That's a good one. And you're like, where do I start? Give me a map. So you use this, it's called the funnel of pain. You start with the first statement, protect IP. Okay, well, what does that mean? What does IP mean to you? What's keeping you up at night? And then they get down to, oh, well, you know, it's really this stuff that really has high margin for us. Okay, well, what's protected by patent? What's not protected? What's trade secret? You know, what's that? The secret sauce. Oh, okay, now we're down to the secret sauce stuff. Okay, what's the secret sauce stuff that, you know, has high margin, isn't in a growth market, not kind of in a, it's been, you know, in a long chain, it's got the long tail and it's starting to move into the commodity space. Okay, what's that? Oh, okay. Well, where do they develop that? Who are the engineers that work on that? Oh, okay. How do we protect that? Who would be the people who would be interested in it? Who are the people in the company who need to get access to it? Oh, okay. And then you start getting down to this nugget, and sure enough, you're like, oh, really? So if I protect like these few scientific documents, these couple of drawings, we've got the first level covered? Oh, okay. That's the stuff that's keeping you up at night. You're really worried about this? Now I've got a place to focus. And you take that funnel of pain, because everybody comes to you with this broad statement. You got to figure out how to whittle them down to what's the real nugget, the value that brought them to you in the first place. Or the thing that really matters that they're going to be like, wow, you really brought value. And this technique, I found it also to be very helpful. The basic project management, the PMP guide. You have to write a problem statement. You have to identify a stakeholder. You know, and through getting a stakeholder and defining your problem statement, I found that when you really write a good problem statement, you kind of whittle through this to what's really, you know, you're defining your scope, you're defining your criteria, you're defining what's the end result going to be, what's the deliverable going to be, and is that deliverable satisfy and align with the stakeholder's needs? Really powerful, very valuable, because you'll find you do a lot of work that doesn't get a lot of traction. When you start getting to the real nugget of what they need, you'll get more of your day will be focused on more of high value stuff. Service. This is one of my favorite ones. This is one of my favorite ones because I always thought I was kind of good at customer service. I'm an outgoing guy, I'm friendly, you know, I say hi to people. And I was out to lunch with a good friend from HR, and she was telling me this story where she called into our service desk to get help. And she told me who she got. And I was like, oh, well, you rolled up into third tier. You know, the service desk must have been full, and your call rolled up to one of our third tier guys. I was like, this is going to be a good story. She's going to tell me how awesome IT is because she got one of our rock stars. This is great. And she's like, oh, it was terrible. I'm like, what do you mean it was terrible? She's like, got on the phone with him. He was like, how can I help? And I was like, oh, okay. Well, I don't see a problem with that. And she's like, I was just telling him, I was like 2 or 3 minutes into what my problem was, and he's like, can I take control of your screen? Okay. And a little pop-up comes up, she accepts it. He's like, I'm gonna put you on hold real quick. Puts her on hold, mouse is going all over the place. He gets back on the phone like a minute later, he's like, oh, you're all set, have a great day. Hangs up on her. And I'm thinking, man, he got your problem fixed in like 2 minutes. That's great, that's first call resolution. That's a good metric, everyone's happy, and she's like, I have no idea. He never let me tell him what my problem was. He didn't tell me what he did. I have no confidence that he really fixed it or that it'll come back again. I feel terrible about it. I don't know if my machine, I need to know it works this weekend when I'm working, and I have no confidence that it's going to keep working. This is terrible. Could you come look at it again? And I'm like, what do you mean? It was fixed. It was fixed in like a minute. And there was this core message that I had to think about it. People will remember how you made them feel longer than they remembered the problem you solved. And in IT, I don't think we're very good at that. I'm not very good at that. I can tell you, when I was doing more service work, I had no idea who that person was, but as soon as they give me their machine, I would know who they were. Really, somebody would walk into my office and I'd be like, hi, how can I help? And then they'd hand me their laptop or whatever, and I'd be like, oh, yeah, I know you. I knew their tech. I didn't know the person. Because I wasn't making connection, wasn't listening to them, wasn't being positive about their problems, I wasn't understanding their concerns, their values. If you spend the time with somebody and you deliver really good customer service is less about what you did for them and more about how you made them feel when you did it. And if you think about how powerful that is, as you're trying to build your career, build your connections, and you're trying to get stuff done in an organization, when you're developing those relationships, and that person now, you solved their problem, but more than that, you made them feel confident that you understood their problem first, and then you explained to them how you solved their problem, so now they have confidence in the delivery of the solution. You've just won a raving fan. You've won someone who now has your trust. You're now a trusted advisor. So when you go into a project meeting with them, and you're like, hey guys, I think we should really turn on this DNSSEC stuff. They're like, oh, you know, he helped me with my mouse the other day. He knows what he's talking about. We should probably do this DNSSEC. That makes sense. It works. It sounds crazy, but it works. And not only that, you'll be happier.
And the other thing we kind of tag on that person's not your snort box, right? They are a human snort box. You've now built their trust, and they are going to bring you security issues they see, because people everywhere in your organization are seeing problems, and you're never going to have enough security people to be everywhere and keep track of it. So you need to kind of have these lieutenants everywhere who are going to kind of help you out, help you do your job, and bring you those problems. And by helping them first is a great way to, what do we call it? They are our human sensors.
Army of human sensors. You really build your network, you get people to trust you, you need people to bring you their problems. That's how you start to build that. So you want to be their servant. Just say maybe. This one's Chris and I's favorite. So in security and IT in general, we love to say no. I mean, somebody comes into my office and they're like, Dropbox? No. I love to say no. Man, it hurt me. I tell you. Every time I said no, I thought I was just making us stronger. Man, was I not. It was just, they were just finding another way around me. All I was doing was creating myself as a roadblock that they were going, you know what, I'm not even going to tell them I'm doing this, I'm just going to go around them and do it. Saying no is so dangerous. You think you're helping yourself, you think you're helping the organization, you're really not. You need to take the time to listen to them. You need to approach it in a positive way. You need to understand what their values are, what their needs are. And then you need to provide good customer service and delivering. And this is one thing that Chris's boss said. You don't want to provide a compromised solution, because a compromise means both of you have to give a little something. You want to come up with a collaborative solution. Something where both parties have a win-win. Not a win-lose, not a lose-win, not a lose-lose, but really if you take the time to walk through the first 5 steps, you don't have to compromise, you can find a collaborative solution. But it really starts with understanding the problem, approaching it, knowing what their needs are, and then finding a way that they can do it safely without putting the organization at risk. And most of the time when they come in, they ask for this big stupid thing like, oh, I need you to open up FTP. Where? Well, everywhere. Okay. But when you start taking them through the funnel of pain, you find out that they're like, oh, you know, our email system only allows me to send a file that's this big, and I need to send a file that's just like 1 meg bigger. I figured I'd just open up FTP for everywhere. But if you take the time, you get down to what they really need, oh, not a problem. We'll totally come up with a solution that's collaborative, and we can both win at this. I've also found that because of SaaS services and the advent of, you know, it's really easy for a business unit to just pull out their credit card and buy a solution. And it was great to just be like, oh, no, you shouldn't do that, you shouldn't do that. Now I love it. I love to know what they're going out and getting, because it's the best way to know what's missing in my service catalog. If they're having to go out and get a SaaS service or some other software or hardware, there's a business need. And we weren't servicing it in IT. So finding out what the users are doing that's kind of, you know, shadow IT is really the best way to feed into what your service catalog's missing. A good example of this was I had a lot of shadow IT happening in SaaS services. Everybody with a credit card was just setting them up. I brought in a service, single sign-on. Stood it up. I was like, this is going to be great for security. We're going to do all this stuff with it. All of a sudden, I started to get these phone calls from, you know, different business unit leaders saying, hey, yeah, could you join a call? We're reviewing some software, and we want to make sure that this thing works with that single-click sign-in thing that you've got there, where I just got to click the button once and it just works. I want to make sure that my software works with that. Oh, man, are you kidding? Now I'm injected into their product review cycle, and then I call my buddies in legal, and I'm like, hey, you know, maybe we should be looking at this contract. Now legal loves me because I'm making the connections. I'm never saying no. And I'm providing services that they want to make sure their new softwares offer. So this is where that just say maybe really comes into effect. If you start to become Dr. No, there's a good Gartner article out there, No More Dr. No, and the whole Gartner article talks about this phenomenon in IT and how saying no really ends up, you know, taking away all your power and control in the organization and eventually be outsourced or replaced. And saying maybe and approaching things in a different way really has an amazing effect. So that's the first 5. That'll turn it over to Chris.
All right. Thanks, Jack. So this one's near and dear to me. Don't be the smartest guy in the room. A lot of us in different IT roles, and especially as you move into security, you know, you see it as this kind of upward trajectory in a lot of places, right? I worked at help desk, I worked at server admin. All right, I'm in security now. I must really be smart. I must really know what I'm doing. And what got you to that spot was being technically good, and a lot of times being the smartest guy in the room. And you now find yourself in this weird spot where what got you there is not the same thing that's going to necessarily help you get done what you need to do now that you are there, right? So You still need that technical background. You still need all that security acumen, but there's all this collaboration, as we've been talking about, you need to do with people. And if you just hop into a meeting and tell people they're idiots and tell them they have no idea what they're doing, and if you just shut up and listen to me, I'll explain to you how to do all of your jobs. And you should have known this to begin with, but I'll explain it anyways. You don't tend to make a lot of friends that way, right? And we don't always realize that we're doing it. If you have a lot of that knowledge, you might sit in a room, and just because you have that knowledge, you want to share it. And you don't realize, as Jack said, you're just sucking the air out of the room. There is 10 other people sitting in there. They all had thoughts and ideas, and guess what? They probably have to do the work. And all you're doing, you may have the best solution in the world that you're kind of spitting out at everybody, but none of them are part of building it. They're just hearing your version. And so they're not going to be that bought into actually doing it. And so you kind of wasted your breath telling them about your great idea. One of the things that one of my old clients, Carl, said to me that really is kind of stuck. He said, you get to a certain point in your career and you look around and you realize before it was always about what could I accomplish? What could I get done? Me individually. What could I do? And look at the great things I did. And then at a certain point it's a shift where you realize it's no longer about what you did. It's about what did the team do. And team doesn't necessarily mean I have this team of minions that all reports to me and I told them what to do when they did it. More often, team is the group of people that happen to be in the room who all work together on a solution, right? I might have one thing I'm working on, you know, it could be myself and it's HR and it's legal, and we're all working together on something and we accomplish something, and nobody gives a crap if it was my idea or not to begin with. If we had a problem we were trying to solve, we solved it. That is all that matters. And so we had an earlier slide that said your ego is not your amigo. To me, that ties in with this one a lot because it's really trying to take yourself out of it and kind of, you want to inject that knowledge, but you don't want to, as you guys said so well at the beginning, you don't want to be a dick. You want to kind of lead the group through coming to the right solution together. One of the things that you can do is to listen more than you talk, right? Also challenging. Both Jack and I could probably talk for hours about security and anything else. We like to talk. I'm sure a lot of you guys are the same way, right? You wouldn't be here in a group like this wanting to kind of learn a little bit more if you didn't have a lot of knowledge and didn't like to share it. Challenge yourself when you get in some of these meetings where you know you tend to take the lead, or you know you tend to share your ideas, to just shut the hell up for a while and listen to what other people are saying. And sit back. Don't ignore them. Don't get your phone out. Don't, actively listen to what they're saying, engage in it, and wait to start sharing your opinion until you've really heard what other people have going on, what's in their heads. I'm not going to claim I do this well every day. I remind myself of it constantly. I've got a copy of this list on my desk at work, so I don't forget these things. They're not all easy, but it really helps to get that engagement with others when you try to take that ego out and really listen to them a little bit more. So this is another good one, and I think it goes hand in hand in a lot of ways with don't be the smartest guy. Keep it simple. Again, as anybody who's been in an engineer role, an architect role, and grown through there in security, it's really easy to develop an elaborate solution. And those are fun, right? We could probably get the group in this room to design something great. We could solve world hunger with the brains in this room, with our brilliant plans. But could we actually implement it? Could we execute on it? Sometimes you need to settle for good enough, as opposed to what is the perfect architecture, right? What's the best way to do it? Because then you've got at least something, and you can move on. And that's a tough one too. And again, I stumble over this every day where I start to dig into a problem, and You know, Jack's example earlier with, you know, the 6,000 vulnerabilities is a good example of that. You know, a lot of us sitting here probably went, right, but they didn't fix all of it. They had all this other crap they still hadn't done. So yeah, you got some stuff patched, but, you know, those of you who've done any pen testing, any hacking, like, but I still probably could have found something I could have got in. No, you might be right. But was he better off to at least get some of that stuff patched? And then next month they get a little more, and the next month they get a little more, versus beat somebody over the head and say, you need to do it all now, and if you don't, then we're screwed. Nobody wants to do it, and you don't get any of it done. As opposed to having this simple but effective plan where over time, and then you get there. One of the ones I like to talk about with this is what we did for vulnerability management. So, you know, coming from my consulting background, I come in and I'm thinking, well, we haven't done as much as I'd like in this space, and what we're going to need an enterprise-grade solution, right? I'm going to need a centralized console that manages a network of scanners throughout all these different parts of the environment. In fact, I'm going to need a couple of FTEs that can run that whole program. We're going to need people to run around and fix everything. I'm like, right. So there's no budget for that. But you got to copy in essence. What am I going to do with that? You know, there's this crusty laptop in the corner somewhere. You know, it's 3 years old. It's got an inch of dust on it. And it's got one copy of Nessus on it. Well, it's a whole lot better than having nothing, right? So, since I didn't have the budget to go out and buy all the tools I wanted, which, by the way, nobody understood why I wanted that, because they'd never seen any of these things before. So, we took that one little copy of Nessus, and actually, like Jack's story, put a change control out there. All right, this weekend we scan this chunk of the network. This weekend we scan this chunk. This weekend we scan this chunk. Little by little by little. Do we hit every last piece? No. But we started to build up some visibility, which is what was killing me. And I'm coming in new, I'm like, I don't know what's going on. I don't know where the holes are. I'm really uncomfortable with this. So I started to get a better and better idea with all those slices. We have the problem too, what do I do with all the data? What do I do with this crap? Well, I got a SharePoint. And it's free. And I got a SharePoint developer in the corner who can tell me all kinds of neat things we can do with it. Secure State, I learned how to build workflows in it. So now we've got a little workflow that goes through SharePoint, and we pull in the stuff people come to me with directly. Hey, here's this big hole in this piece of software. Maybe you should know about it. Or the stuff that comes out of the scanner. We feed it into that process, and that's now in a set of metrics that goes out to all of our management within our IT group every month. And we look at all the top vulnerabilities, something they were never looking at before. Now I have people who are coming back to me and saying, crap, we really need to fix this piece of software. You've been reporting it as critical in the last couple of months. This is absolute crap. My guys need to do something about that. I'm starting a project to fix it. And by the way, why don't you know anything about this network over there? Well, because I don't really have the tools to do that. Oh, well, let me help you make the case for the budget. I've kind of done my proof of concept. I took, you know, the duct tape chewing gum I had sitting around and cobbled together something that is not great by any stretch of the imagination. And the consultant in me is cringing about all the things I'd like to be doing. But it's making my case. And now people start to understand the value, and we should invest in this. Execution. So this is one you look at, and it seems so kind of stupid and obvious that it shouldn't have to be said. There's a reason we're saying it. So another thing we're good at in security, we're good at coming up with all these great plans and kind of come to the other group and say, I know where all your problems are. Here's what you need to do. Go do it. Good luck. And again, as a consultant, you come back a while later, even as the internal guy, and say, well, why didn't you fix all of the problems? You need to be a little more actively involved. You can't just come up with a plan and throw it to somebody else. And when you come up with your own plans for how you're going to solve some of these security problems, this is the part that just sounds so dumb you shouldn't have to say it. You got to execute on the plan. We really suck at that sometimes. I think you guys used Batman earlier, right? I think of the Joker. right? In the second, in the Dark Knight. And he says he's like a dog. He's just chasing cars. And he's not sure what he would do once he catches it. Well, in security, sometimes we complain so long and so loud about all of the problems. When somebody finally says, "I'm ready to fix it, and here's the budget," what? I'm allowed to do this now? We almost aren't ready to go and execute and follow through because we're not always used to doing it. We're used to being chicken little. So again, it seems really obvious, but really, really think about that as you are out there pointing out these problems. Do you have a real plan? And the things that you're asking for, if I was to give them to you, would you be able to execute on it? Or would you go, oh, you know what? I got these 5 other things on my plate. There's no way I have time for this. I mean, it's important, but you should really hire 2 other people to go take care of this. Why are you asking me to go do it? So if you're telling me it needs done, you better make sure it gets done once I tell you go. Walk the talk is another one that security's not always good at. Back when I was in National City, we were the Department of No. We had about 100 people whose entire job was to tell Jack he couldn't do what he was trying to do. And we said it a little bit differently. We say that do as I say, not as I do. And we were very guilty of that, right? Within our groups, we would duplicate a lot of what was done elsewhere in IT because security's got to do that. Security's got to manage that system. It is so important we have to own it. Oh, but by the way, because our job is not full-time system administration, we're going to do a crappy job keeping up to date on patches, of making sure passwords are being recycled. All the stuff we yell at other people for, yeah, we're not going to do it. Also, give me admin rights on every system everywhere, just because, right? People don't tend to trust you that well when you don't actually walk what you're talking. Think of yourself in the security role as being an example for the folks that you're interacting with, right? You're asking them to do things. Are you asking them to do things that you are accepting yourself from? You're going to set a lot of policies. When you are setting policies, you need to not just follow them, you need to hold yourself the most accountable. Example I like to use, having administrator access. So when I started the new job, the first things they said was, oh, that's great. We're going to give you, we'll give you domain admin, we'll give you local admin on your own system. I don't need any of those things. I mean, you guys run the server, right? Yeah. You manage my workstation, right? Yeah. So what does the average employee do when they need software? Well, they open up a ticket and they request it. Then I'll do that. I don't want to be exempt from that policy. Now, I also know that after a while, I'm probably going to find these same people all have local admin on their own systems, and I'm going to ask them to remove it. So I've got a little more solid moral ground I'm on if I've been sitting there for several months having to go and open up a ticket every time I want some new piece of software, not being able to do whatever I want in my system. And they know that. They know that I didn't, have those rights on my system, and I make sure they know. If you're going to set other policies, right? You're going to say everybody has to have, two-factor access on certain kinds of accounts. You better make sure that you have that. If you say that you shouldn't have anybody tailgating into your building, okay, have you ever let somebody in behind you that you shouldn't have? Do you follow your own visitor policy? Do you manage your own passwords well? It's a lot easier to tell other people to do things than it is to kind of follow your own rules.
So I've got a password story I'd like to share with this. I have a great password. I have really good, passphrase password. The problem is no one knows it. I don't tell people my password. Now I tell everyone else, have a good password. I set a really good password policy. And then I run password cracker against our AD. Sure enough, all the passwords met the criteria because, AD won't let them set, let them take care of the password. But all the passwords were really bad. Well, not all of them, but there was a whole segment of passwords that were like, welcome to GraphTech 1. And I'm like, oh, okay. And then there was a whole bunch that were like 2, 3, 4, 5. It was all welcome to GraphTech. And I'm like, my own service desk wasn't walking the talk. I'm doing all this security awareness training about passphrases. I'm sending out emails about passphrases. I'm bringing in guest speakers to talk about passphrases. Meanwhile, if you contact our service desk, or even more importantly, your very first day at work, we give you this generic password that conforms to the policy, but is not a passphrase. And every time you lock out your account, you call the service desk and they give you a terrible password that conformed to the password policy, and we weren't training them on passphrases. We had the service desk start using phrases. We gave them a list of like 12 phrases, and they start making up their own, and then now now your new account when you join the company and your password reset are actual passphrases. Then when we started cracking passwords, all those generic passwords started going away, because what people would do is they take that crappy password and they'd increment the number at the end. You could almost tell how many months away it was since they last locked out their account. That was a great example for me of really walking the walk. It was one thing, sure, I was doing it myself, I was training about it, but when they'd interact with IT and we give them a password, we were giving them something terrible. So we were only perpetuating the problem.
I think we've successfully frustrated all the attempts to videotape this.
Yeah, I'm doing my best.
I'm going to go down the slide for today. Self-reflection. So this, in a lot of ways, ties up the whole kind of process that we had pulling this thing together. So I mentioned that this kicked off, at least for me, it was about how do I learn how to shift from consultant to the in-house person? What do I need to do differently? And that has led me, through a lot of this feedback and just through the experience, the realization that a lot of that is about managing myself. And who am I? What am I good at? What am I bad at? There's all this wishy-washy stuff, right, that you hear, can I just get back to firewalls, ideas, and the hard stuff I know I'm good at. This is hugely important to kind of underpinning all this stuff and really being successful. A lot of things you probably don't want to get done. You need to understand who you are and manage your weaknesses and maximize your strengths. For me, one of the things that came out of this process is realizing I'm really impatient. I liked as a consultant, where I could seagull in and I spend a week finding all the problems. We put together a report and I'm off to the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. And man, is that fun. And sitting in the same place day after day after day. All right, I know it's going to be a change. I'm going to have to work on that. So I don't just lose my mind and start snapping at people and becoming really unproductive. I'm not going to change the 5,000 people around me in this company who've been working here for decades in some cases. I'm probably not going to force them all overnight to just, oh, Chris wants it done? Okay, we'll all go, all 5,000 of us will run in that direction tomorrow. Unless somebody wants to name me CEO of the company, which, by the way, he can't even do that. So I better change me. And so knowing I'm impatient, Jack mentioned, that work-life thing not necessarily being different. So one of the things I did, I took a triathlon, which was a good thing for me in that you got to work on these little incremental things over a long period of time. You swim, you bike, you run, you keep building up in areas. You can miss a day here and there. That's fine. But it's what you're doing over a year's worth of time that's going to help determine whether you actually get through the thing once it's time to get out there. And if you miss days constantly, if you really slack off, you don't do the work you need to do, you're not going to get there. So it was, to me, a really good kind of similar activity to what I needed to do on work, which is learn how to less go after big payoff tomorrow and more these little slices of things that just built up, and then you look back and you're like, oh wow, I can't believe how far I've gone. I didn't even realize that's how much progress I made. And I've seen the same thing happen, in about a year now that I've been in the current job. I look back and wow, I got a lot of stuff done. It didn't always feel like at the beginning. It felt like we're treading water and like we're not moving things anywhere near as fast as I wanted to. I look back and think, actually, we got a lot done. Now that's me. You guys are all going to be different people. And so the point of that is really spend some time kind of examining yourself. Who are you? What makes you tick? And spending the time with other people. So Jack and I both spend a lot of time with mentors inside of our companies and outside of work. You know, go to lunch with people we've known for a long time, people we've worked for, people who work for us, and ask them, you know, you tell me, when you look at me, what do you see? What do you think I'm good at? What do you think I'm bad at? What's your opinion what I need to work on? Bounce those things off them. And mentor other people as well. And it's that same process by kind of helping other people through that. You'll learn a lot too. That mentoring is huge. That list of people we had at the beginning, I can't stress enough how important their help has been, not just to putting this thing together, but to a lot of what I've been able to work through over the last year, and I think for Jack as well.
So this whole presentation came out of self-reflection. Chris and I were like, you know, summit's coming up. We need to talk. Okay, call for papers is coming out. What are we going to talk about? And we started like throwing some ideas around of some technical topics, some, you know, cool stuff. And then we started kind of, you know, as the beers went on, we started to get a little honest with ourselves. And we were like, you know what, I've been coming to this conference now for 10 years. And people are talking about the same problems. People have the same struggles at work. They're not making progress. They have the same challenges. And you know these people. They're smart. They know the technology inside and out. They understand their problem. They can articulate their problem. They know the solution to their problem. But yet every year, at the end of the summit, they're sitting around kicking back beers and they're bitching about the same problems they've had, same vulnerabilities, same weaknesses. And we were like, that's the problem. It's not the technology. It's not the people. It's how they're getting stuff done. And we started to ask ourselves, what was the switch? When did my program at GraphTech start to make traction versus him coming in every year and telling me the same problems year over year? I mean, everyone, you know, you get that pen test report and it's like, oh, yeah, I know those vulnerabilities. I saw those in the last 3 years. And you start moving forward. It's this practice that really makes that change. And that's where this talk came out of. And these softer skills that you start to apply in everything you do in your life. There's a book called The 7 Habits by Dr. Stephen Covey. In the first chapter of the book, he talks about doing this reflection, building a personal mastery paper, understanding what your drivers and motivations are, where you want to go life personally and professionally. Do they align? Are you on the right path? Are you focusing on the right stuff? There's 4 quadrants. There's kind of urgent, that a lot of people spend most of their life in. And then there's urgent and important, which is kind of that planning thing that you do. And then there's kind of unimportant, and then there's, you know, really, you know, low value stuff. What I found was every day I'd go to work, I was focused on this urgent stuff. Stuff that was just the fires. All I was doing was running on the treadmill. And I wasn't putting enough time in the quadrant 2 activities, which was kind of the planning, going after root cause, building relationships, understanding people's problems and challenges, focusing on the right stuff and not just good stuff. That was when the switch happened. Chris found the same thing. And then when we started talking to more of our mentors and we started to see that was their stuff. And that's what we wanted to leave with you guys tonight.
So with that, we've got a whole list of, you've heard us reference a lot of different business books. We've heard not a lot of security books we've got on this list, right? You know, these are all the things you probably walk through the bookstore and go, what is that crap? Why would anybody? But there's actually good stuff. And a lot of those books, actually like 70 pages long. They don't tend to put, you know, they don't take too much of your time to get through. I really recommend taking a look at a few of these and seeing what you can learn from some of this kind of non-technical stuff. I promise you, it's going to help you get the technical stuff done, get security done, get other stuff done. there's our contact info if anybody wants to reach out to us. Any questions you have about what we talked about. And I guess something we like to do as we're going through these, you know, we've talked a whole lot. Does anybody have a story of their own? We've kind of told a lot of our stories. A story of your own that one of these kind of habits has sparked. Maybe here's something that you did that kind of aligns with some of the stuff we're talking about. You've been able to successfully influence people around you and get stuff done, or crickets.
Harold? I think Chris, French over there, and Marion, and the security guys here at Highland kind of all know, I mean, we've done a combination, they've done a combination of all of this stuff in order to get security even on the map and so.
That's great.
So this is just kind of more like a comment. I know, I came from technical support here at Highland, which is just answering phones, putting out fires, running on a treadmill, and just doing a lot like that. And looking at the 10 habits here, really something that I ran into a lot over there that really was not productive at all is running into people who just feel like they're the smartest guys in the room. And it's all about egos. And it's all about just having to have the last word of stuff. And what you find at the end of the day is you end up not enjoying the people that you work next to, and that just further contributes to, you know, it can become toxic eventually at some points. So I think that's a really good point that you made there. I'm happy to see it there.
Thank you for the feedback.
Yeah, that's great. Not great to have it, but
Yeah.
great feedback. Anybody else? Stories or anything in that same vein where you've seen maybe seen some of these work the other way? All right. Well, thanks everybody for your time. Again, if you want to reach out to me and Jack, there we are. And thanks for having us.
What? Oh, no? Not again?
How you been?
Yep.
Yeah, I know. That's why last time I saw you,
Jeff, actually, could you come back up here, please? Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
He's like a dog.
We have a little tradition at CleveSec, some of you might know, to give out little speaker gifts at the end of each talk. So we have here a little message in the bottle.
Oh, that's awesome.
That's really cool.
The message inside comes from the InfoSec Sage. You can find him on Twitter at InfoSec Sage. And the cork is actually a USB flash drive, 8 gigs. So
Very cool.
Awesome.
there you go.
Is the message I am Batman?
Probably not.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
No problem. Thanks for coming out. So again, take a few minutes. We're gonna have some announcements in between, and then get set up for the next talk.
The slide deck's also out on SlideShare. It's on both of our LinkedIn profiles, so you can get the slide deck. Like Chris said, Tim and I actually both have this hanging up in our offices, kind of reminding us of these habits, because it's easy to fall back into bad behaviors. It's easy to tell people no. It's easy to jump to an answer. You want to kind of always remind yourself kind of how to be a little bit better. And that made a big difference for me in my career and personally. And I hope you guys have the same success. Good luck.
I guess that's the right way to start a talk. So I know we had a great management talk that started off this, and this is not going to quite be the same. This is going to be a talk where we talk about something a little bit more technical. But yes, this is going to be both kind of overview, how do you explain something that's really, really important to average, normal people? How do we convey this information? But also, how do we secure this? So DNS is really, really, really important. And it's actually really, 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 really important. The problem I see all too often is that no one really can articulate how DNS actually works very well. I guess just to get a show of hands, how many of you actually would be in a position where you administer DNS or at least touch it on a somewhat regular basis? Cool, so at least there's going to be some people in this audience who understand this. A lot of times, I guess even those of you who actually work with DNS, how many of you feel like you could comfortably explain the process to someone? Even better. I like it when people can do that. What I find all too often, and what I do for a lot of presentations, is I get to the point where I explain something so many times that it annoys me enough that I write a presentation, and then I can just go through the presentation and have something that people can reference. And there was just really no good, here's exactly how DNS works, and here's how we can secure it, here's the process, and a nice visual way to do that. And that's kind of the goal of this presentation, to take something that's such a fundamental core part of the internet, the operation of what we do every day, and break it down to something that we can explain to not just our coworkers and ourselves, but also the other people who maybe aren't as technical, to help them understand why this process is so important in the event that it comes up. So, without further ado, let's get started. Why DNS? I mean, name resolution is really, really important. People like to be able to go to google.com and give Google as opposed to just some random IP address. How many of you have heard this before? Is the internet down? I can't tell you the number of times that people have told me, hey, the internet's not working. No, you just have a DNS problem. The internet's fine. Don't worry about it. The internet is not broken. But all too often, that's what people see as an internet problem when their name resolution doesn't work. We see cases where DNS has been used for various attacks. We've seen the cases where the New York Times DNS was taken down. And talking to some people that I know that were trying to access the website by IP address, it just was really, really painful. But for all intents and purposes, the New York Times was completely down when that DNS attack was happening. The other thing I really like to do as an engineer is to understand how things really work and be able to effectively convey that to people. And to really understand what process happens to resolve a name, from the client making a request, going through the whole mismatch of the internet, which is amazing that it even works, and we'll get to that. But to understand how that process happens, going around the globe, talking to different servers, and eventually coming back with an answer, all in a matter of milliseconds. And then, since this is a security presentation, and since most of us are here to talk about security, I want to spend a lot of time talking about how DNS can be used in attacks. How attackers are leveraging this protocol, which is really a fundamental core part of the internet that we can't just make go away. But how do we use this, and how do we secure it, and prevent some of these attacks from happening? So really, DNS is the largest database in existence. It's globally distributed and consists of millions upon millions of servers all across the globe. In order for a single name request to function, there's not just servers that exist at a local site. There's servers that exist in other areas. There's servers that exist basically at every place that's hosting a website. And it doesn't just involve a single server to respond to this, like a web page server hosting a website. There's multiple sites. And then you think about how this is distributed all across the globe, and we want to have answers quickly, and we also want to have answers that are accurate. And we want them to not go down and be resilient as well. And how many of you work with databases on a somewhat regular basis? For those of you who work at Highland, I assume that's a pretty core component of OnBase, so that makes sense. How often do databases break?
Too often.
Yes. DNS is the biggest database, and it really doesn't break that often on a global scale, which is really awesome. The fact that it is so reliable, considering it's basically duct taped together and relying on a whole bunch of everyone in the world to get their stuff together to make it all work. So it really is awesome. There's no single source of information for DNS. There's not just one guy who writes down all the DNS records and mails them out to everyone on a regular basis. That's the way it used to work, but not anymore. That wasn't practical for the scale of the internet. But it is something that just works well, given the scale of it. So to get everyone on the same page, I'm going to use a couple of DNS terms. For a lot of you, this could be review, but I want to make sure that there isn't anyone left in the dark on anything here. First and foremost, we have the concept of a local resolver. This is a DNS server that exists at a site. Any organization most likely is going to be having their own DNS servers just to reduce the amount of traffic that has to leave the company. Your local resolver could resolve internal company names. If you have an intranet site, for example, if you have other systems that need to have names resolved, typically your Active Directory domain controllers are going to function as DNS servers just because those functions are so intertwined. You might also resolve names differently internally for like your corporate website, so it doesn't have to go out to the internet to be accessed internally. Your local resolver often will also cache requests. It takes us to caching, so that people, I would assume, are going to be looking up Google often, or YouTube, or Twitter, or any other corporate websites that need to be accessed regularly. Those sites, you don't necessarily need to ask the internet where that IP address is on a constant basis. It's not going to change all the time. So by caching for a period of time, we reduce the load across this globally distributed database. There's also public DNS servers. These are offered by often ISPs. Google has their 8.8.8.8 DNS server. DNS servers that everyone can use. If you have a local resolver that's incorrectly configured, it can be a public DNS server, and that can lead to some problems. There's also root servers. These people think are like the end-all be-all. They have all the answers. That's not the way it works. Root servers, they're at the top of the DNS tree, which we're going to go through. And they only really tell where the authoritative name servers for the top-level domains are. And those top-level domains are like your .com, your .org, your .info. And the root servers delegate authority to the authoritative name servers, and this keeps on going down the tree, as we'll see. So let's break down what's in a domain name. I have a little bit of company placement here, so bear with me. But we have, at the base of every DNS name is the DNS root. It's this invisible dot that you never touch. Think of DNS as a tree, and this dot is at the top of this tree, and everything kind of grows out from there. Off of the DNS root, we have top-level domains. You have your .com, your .org, your .info, your .edu. All of these top-level domains are like the primary part of the DNS structure of the internet. These are handled by authoritative name servers that delegate their authority to individual domain names. And these are often the biggest quantity that is held by an organization. You'll have your .com that no one is .com, but you'll have HurricaneLabs.com, OnBase.com, HighlandSoftware.com. And then from that, you'll have subdomains, and this can keep on going as far as you want, but this authority continues to be delegated down. So at the top level, you delegate this authority to individual top-level domain managers, registrars, who delegate their authority down to individual organizations that own the domain name, that can further subdelegate the name down to a finer level. And this really is the hierarchical tree structure of DNS. And it really allows for so many different levels of management and control, so that you don't have to make a change up here if you add another subdomain in front of www.hurricanelabs.com. That's something we can control. So what we're going to do is walk through the entire process of a DNS resolution, starting from the client making a request. There's going to be no caching in this environment at this point because no one in this network has resolved a DNS request yet. But this is basically exactly the process that happens to resolve something in the DNS tree. So your client, of course, they want to go to hurricanelabs.com. I would recommend you do that sometime. It's a great website. It sends a request to your local DNS server. This is your local resolver. And local resolver is like, hey, I don't know who these guys are. I'm going to go find out. And that's exactly what the local resolver will do. It doesn't know the domain, so it starts by going to the root server. It does not ask, where is hurricanelabs.com for the root server, because the root server doesn't know that. It's going to simply ask, where is .com? And the root server will give the information for the .com authoritative name servers to the local DNS servers. So the only thing that the root servers know about in the DNS tree are the locations of these top-level domain authoritative name servers. All too often, people think that the root servers know everything, and that's not the case. They are so busy being inundated with requests just for these that they don't have time to do anything else. Now, DNS root servers, there are quite a number of them across the globe. I think they're up to like M. They're lettered, so there's A, B, C, D, all throughout the alphabet. They're using Anycast to globally distribute them, so it's not like there's just some box in some guy's basement that's a root server. They're a little bit more redundant than that. But pretty much when the internet started, there were people who took on the role of maintaining root servers. And they very well could have been boxes in people's basement at that point because the internet was just a giant science experiment at one point, and it kind of took off. So the root servers, they really just come back with the answer for this top-level domain. And at that point, the only thing the local DNS server knows is, hey, I know how to get to .com. So it's going to have more questions. Now that it knows where the top-level domain server for .com is, it can now ask the top-level domain server, hey, where's hurricanelabs.com? And the top-level domain server goes ahead and looks at the list of 4 domains, Hurricane Labs, Google, Amazon, and Facebook, and says, hey, I know where hurricanelabs.com's authoritative name server is. It's this IP address. And it returns that to the local DNS server. So at this point, the only thing the local DNS server knows is, hey, this is where I'm going to go to ask Hurricane Labs where an IP address is for a site. There's nothing else that it knows at this point, so it still needs to ask another question. Where is www.hurricanelabs.com? The local DNS server talks to the Hurricane Labs authoritative name server and it looks at its list of www.hurricanelabs.com, training.hurricanelabs.com, beacon.hurricanelabs.com. It returns the IP address, 74.114.44111, back to the local DNS server. At that point, we have a completed name resolution on the local DNS server, which is then returned to the client. And the client is able to now go to that IP address for the web server. So 9 steps from the client making a request all the way to getting an answer to come back. And that was just a single address. Think about what's involved with a lookup. Loading a web page, a complex site like CNN.com, where you not only have content, you have images, you have advertisements, you have content from other sites. All of these might result in multiple DNS requests, multiple name queries. All of this happening at once within a very, very short period of time. Isn't it amazing that anything even works, given the nature of all this and all the parties involved? But yeah, each of these times you're having these processes. That's where caching comes in handy. These answers can be saved in the local DNS servers, so they don't have to go to the root servers always to ask where .com is, for example. Other people are going to be looking up Google and Amazon and Facebook, so that can be cached locally. It does save time. And that really helps this whole structure function on a global scale. But yeah, it's really an awesome process, given the number of people involved and the complexity. Now, it's very, very unlikely that Google is going to have a single DNS server. just laying around. They're going to have multiple DNS servers. Generally, in most cases, you should get the same answer, but there are ways to manipulate DNS so that it behaves differently given the environment. For example, Google.com is not just a single IP address on the internet. There's multiple records that are returned for different Google servers. Google DNS records in a different country could return different IP addresses based on the country that's requesting. So there's all kinds of ways to leverage DNS to try to send people to different locations based on where they're coming from. Using DNS for that is not always the best result because it isn't designed to be a constantly up-to-date protocol because there is caching that's structured. So a change can take a while to propagate through the internet. So now let's get to the cool part that everyone cares about. Threats, security. If you break stuff and talk about it, people will be interested for whatever reason. So the things I'm going to talk about specifically are open resolvers for DNS, distributed denial of service attacks, blind transfers, registrar hacking, and tunneling. And these are all different things that we've seen, both from a client-facing perspective, but also on an internet across the whole perspective, of ways that DNS has been leveraged. One of the things about DNS is it's just one of those protocols that's pretty much always going to be there, and it's something that people don't really see as a threat, because you're just resolving domain names. How can I do anything bad with that? Unfortunately, given that, people are leveraging it to use it to do kind of nefarious things with the protocol. And because DNS is so resilient and designed to pretty much withstand whatever conditions it's faced with, it's really a good protocol to use for a lot of very evil things. So open resolvers are really just a common misconfiguration. What often happens is DNS servers that are public on the internet for resolving a company site, they should only be configured to return results for that company. So Highland, for example, their DNS servers should really only return addresses for IPs or host names that Highland owns. onbase.com, highlandsoftware.com. No one should be asking Highland Software's public-facing DNS servers where Google's IP addresses are, because you haven't bought Google yet. When that changes, then you'll be able to do that. But this is a common misconfiguration because what happens is people often create these public-facing DNS servers that are basically public DNS as a service that anyone can use to resolve names from any site on the internet. You're probably wondering, okay, that's nice. ISPs do that. Why can't I? Why can't I be an ISP? Unfortunately, this is one of those things where it's leveraged by attackers for doing bad things. So let's look at an example here. And I'll do the Windows version and the Linux version. When you run a DNS request against a server, you should see a result where the query is refused. So for example, if I do an NS lookup on my computer and I set the server to the public IP address, and this is something you can go ahead and test against any DNS server that you run. Just put in the public IP for it, and then you run a query for something that you don't own. So in this case, I'm running it against something that isn't hurricanelabs.com, and my server is saying, hey, query's refused. I can't look up. And you see, there's a little typo on the slides here. I'm asking for hurricanelabs.com, and it says I can't see google.com. Assume that one of these two things are the same, and you'll be good. But basically, that's the response you should see when you're testing for an open resolver. Now, if you're configured incorrectly, what you should see is actually getting an answer. So you do the same thing, you set it to point at your IP address, you ask, hey, what's www.hurricanelabs.com? It responds with an IP address. So what's happening in this case is your server IP address here, which is not authoritative for hurricanelabs.com, is returning answers. Now, if you were an ISP providing public DNS services, this would be perfectly normal and expected, but you're not in this case, so you don't want to see this happen. On the Linux side, if you use dig, it'll be very similar. In this case, testing it against one of our Hurricane Labs name servers. We try to query for google.com. We get this warning here, recursion requested but not available. That's what you want to see. I'm asking the Hurricane Labs name server in this case, I'd like you to recursively look this up for me. The name server is saying, hey, go away. It's exactly what it should do. Now in this case, when you are doing it the wrong way, you're looking at hurricanelabs.com or hurricanelabs.bz. They were a little creative with that name. Looking for google.com, and I get an answer back here from the server. That's what we shouldn't see in this case. So yeah, if you run a DNS server, go ahead and run these tests against it. It'll tell you if it's configured correctly or not, and if it's a risk. So why is this bad? Attackers, they love open resolvers, and they leverage these for attacks. Because what it allows an attacker to do is significantly multiply the quantity of traffic that they send at a victim. And this is done through manipulating DNS traffic and DNS requests. So basically, an attacker, like any good attacker, they have a botnet. And these botnets are just compromised machines that they can do whatever the heck they want with. What the attacker does is it basically sends the botnet machines a list of open DNS resolvers. And what they do is they spoof a DNS request for a text or an any record, which is basically telling a DNS server to respond back with every record that it has for a given name. It's basically the largest DNS record that you can get back as a result. The only thing the attacker really cares about is a large quantity of traffic. So they direct these botnet machines to use the open resolvers with a spoofed return address being the victim server, being some guy that they just want to go away on the internet. And the attacker, they just send a small amount of traffic, which is basically a text file, to these botnet machines. The botnet machines go ahead and make a ton of requests to these open resolvers, and this poor victim server is just having all this DNS crap just spewing at him that he can't really stop. Coming from legitimate DNS servers that are open resolvers that can return that traffic. And that's really been something that's been leveraged for quite a number of attacks in recent years. So, how do we stop this? Proper configuration, just like anything. If it's configured correctly, we can help resolve this problem. Fortunately, all DNS servers have a switch on the front of them that you can just flip to turn off recursion, and that solves all this problem. Not quite that simple, but by turning off recursion in your DNS configurations so that it looks like the correct examples that we had previously, that allows this issue to not be a problem on DNS servers that you use and that you manage. So I really encourage you, just for the greater good of the internet, if you're running a DNS server, run these checks. If it's an open resolver, do what you can to fix them so that these types of attacks can't be leveraged as easily. Remember, you're not an ISP unless, of course, you are. So only provide responses for domains that you own. Yeah, your local DNS server talking to your DNS server that you own, asking what's the random domain.com. Don't be the nice guy on the internet. Don't be the nice DNS server, because we all know how that ends. So the other thing, blind transfers are bad. Basically what a blind transfer is a DNS server returning all the results for all the domains that it owns to anyone who asks. DNS transfers are used to keep DNS servers up to date. Typically, there's something that are required for DNS to function if you have more than one DNS server, because you want them to return the same information. But just any random person shouldn't allow the DNS server to send all of its requests and information to a random person. How many of you are pen testers or have done pen testing type work before? Chris, you have. Would it be really easy if you walked up to a company and they gave you their entire phone book?
Doesn't hurt.
Yeah. So if you get a list of every IP address in a company, and there's something that's mail.company.com. What are you going to assume that that is?
I'm going to probably get some mail server.
Yes. Same thing for www or shop.company.com. You get that, you're obviously going to have a heads up. You don't even have to run your Nessus on your 3-year-old laptop that you found in the closet to get that information. You already have the answers pretty much. And you can kind of use that to preemptively understand how an organization is laid out. And really, this is like one of the pen tester's dreams. You're already getting, the keys to the kingdom, or at least you know what doors to look at, without even having to do any scanning or anything that might trip off an alert that you're there. The next DNS threat is domain hijacking. And this is really one of those things that's very, very difficult to stop because it's a social engineering attack and it's often outside of your organization. The attack that I talked about earlier, the New York Times, Twitter is another good example of where this happened. Basically, a bad guy calls up the registrar and it's like, hey, I'm Twitter, and I want you to change my DNS server. They're no longer hosted in like the United States. We're moving all of our DNS servers to Russia. And the domain registrar is like, sure, sounds good. And then all of a sudden, anyone trying to go to twitter.com is now getting an invalid IP address for that DNS resolution. And instead of going to the legitimate site, they're going to someone else's site. And this is one of those things that's happened quite a bit. Registrars, they're a third party, and you don't have the same control over that. And really, the only effective way to handle this is to monitor for changes in your DNS servers for what the responses coming back from the top-level domain say your DNS servers are. If that changes, that's a sign that there's some foul play that's happening, and that should be investigated. Finally, one of my favorite and probably the most annoying use of DNS is DNS as a covert channel. Because DNS is something that can always pretty much be used and allowed in a network, it's a great way to get information out of a network because it's something that can pretty much always be there. And DNS tunneling is one of the ways that this can be done. Basically, the way this functions is you have a client that's running a DNS tunnel application and a DNS tunnel server somewhere on the internet that you own. And bouncing through the DNS tree using the local DNS server with specially crafted DNS requests, you can exfiltrate information out of a network using purely DNS requests as your tunneling method. Instead of like HTTPS or IPsec, DNSSec. Not DNSSec either, DNS tunneling. But basically, using this as a DNS transfer protocol, you can pretty much have unrestricted network access using nothing other than DNS. It's not going to be fast, but it works in pretty much any case. So the question is, when is a DNS request more than just a DNS request? So this is what these DNS requests would look like in an example. Typically, this site would be one where I have my server hosted. Last time I checked, shadysite.info was still available, and I really want to buy it just because it's a great example domain. Just like any info site is automatically shady, so having shadysite.info is just so much better. Generally, you want to have this domain as short as possible, so this is a lousy example because you don't want to have like t.s.info as that, because basically anything you have here that's not part of the domain that's going to carry information is shortening the amount of room you have for a payload. Because this is actually encoded information. So every DNS request is basically something that can be decoded to have a certain content in it. You have a ton of DNS requests, you can pretty much get anything out. Even in cases where you have like a captive portal, for example, you can leverage the fact that you have to resolve DNS at some point in order to send this information out. So like I've seen people who have used this to get, send emails from airplanes because they can still get to the captive portal on the plane by just bouncing through DNS. The fact that it's on a plane using about the slowest method to transfer data, it's not really that good. You're not going to be doing any graphical web pages, watching YouTube videos or anything like that using this method. But if you need to get text out, it works great. So now that I've scared everyone, the question is, how do we solve this? And there's really not a good answer, unfortunately. I'm still trying to work out options for taking care of this. I saw something this week that gives me a little bit of hope, but I haven't tested it yet. One of the vendors we work with has supposedly a protection for detecting one of these products, and I just won't believe it until I see it work, because everything else that I've tried has failed miserably up to this point. Basically, a lot of this comes down to an anomaly detection, where you see a burst in DNS requests coming from a certain client for a certain domain. A lot of times the problem with DNS requests is they're just not something that's even logged on a network because they're so chatty and so common. So trying to even pick that up is unlikely. The other thing is you could whitelist domains, and that would totally fix this problem. But that would be kind of insane, because you're basically back to the days of zone files. I mean, it's like you were talking in the last presentation, the security manager coming to you, installing software, opening a ticket, not having admin access. I mean, what if someone had to open a ticket anytime they needed to resolve a DNS name? Your help desk would kill you. So that's not really a practical solution. You could do something with thresholding DNS request volume, where a client can't make a certain number of DNS requests over a given period of time. But even then, it's kind of a sketchy metric, because you still have to allow a certain quantity of DNS requests. And if you want to exfiltrate credit card numbers or social security numbers, that's not really the biggest thing you're trying to send out. So it really is not an easy thing to stop. So it is an area of ongoing research, and if anyone has any amazing ideas, please talk to me afterwards, and I'd love to come up with a good solution for this. But with that in mind, now you know how part of the internet works. And now when people come to you and say, hey, the internet's broken, you can tell them it's just a DNS problem, and they'll totally be cool with that and not smack you. So, with that, does anyone have any questions?
What other solutions have you tried?
I've tried IPS protections in different firewalls. There are some that are designed to detect like DNS protocol anomalies. One of the ones that actually was somewhat effective was limiting the maximum size of a DNS request and alerting on anything that was over that request, because a lot of times the programs that do this tunneling are going to send basically start with a really large request and break it down until they find the one that will fit within the allowed limit. If something triggers on an IPS protection for a too long DNS request, that might be your only sign that there's a problem. Another thing that I've seen places do is alert on suspicious DNS activity, because a tunneling protocol or program often tries to resolve directly and hit the server. If everything in your environment is always hitting your internal DNS servers, logging any obscure DNS access that's hitting a drop rule, for example, and not going through your official resolvers, that can be a sign that there's a problem. Those are kind of the big ones. I've tried to do some anomaly like detection stuff in Splunk, and it works great when there's only the tunnel. As soon as you start sending normal DNS traffic, it just kind of falls apart. So if you really understand your network, you can tune it to the point where a strange looking DNS request that hits a firewall rule that it shouldn't can be something that you take action on. But even then, you pretty much have to be to the point where a single DNS request might be your only indicator of a problem. And a lot of people aren't going to take that as something serious because DNS requests happen.
Two-parter. In the how do we fix this section, were you addressing only the tunneling vulnerability? Or were you talking
this
about
one?
Other stuff? Yeah.
Well, this was tunneling, but some of the other stuff they kind of touched on as we went on. But like the domain hijacking, monitoring for changes on your registrar information, that's pretty much the best way to not necessarily stop, but at least detect this happening.
I was going to ask about hijacking. Are there other types of attacks that can accomplish the same goal besides social engineering?
Yes and no. So if you can basically take over the IP address of the DNS server, you can hijack it. That involves manipulating like the internet BGP routing tables. So that's a little bit more difficult. It's not necessarily something that I would say is hard.
Well, I'm thinking you can technically hijack by either owning the DNS server that the clients are talking to. You can man in the middle and impersonate the server, or you could have the clients themselves and change your DNS settings. So there's at least 3 potential threats there.
Yeah, if like the domain hijacking, if you want to do it on a worldwide scale, that's the best way to do it. If you want to do it on a more localized scale, yeah, obviously attacking the individual levels, it all depends on what you're trying to do. If you say, for example, that Twitter had one DNS server and it was vulnerable to something, sure, that would be one way that you could redirect all the traffic for them just by owning that DNS server. Just like if you wanted to do that for someone with a larger scale and a more secured infrastructure, hijacking the registrar is usually going to be an easier approach. But this is definitely something that's been done before, and it's a relatively easy way to make that change happen on a global scale.
You know, you kind of brought something to mind for me that some folks might have seen this week. If you follow the Metasploit blog, which is always really good, they had something about malware bytes. You guys know malware bytes, DNS, tell your system. And they added a handy tool that helps you to push fake updates to malware bytes unless you got the latest patch. Because this company that does security software, does a good job of it, they were authenticating their updates with nothing more than a DNS query. And so you could rewrite the host file on the system to point to your evil update server, and now you are pushing a shell down the box, and it works really nice. So you just kind of, you trigger something for you. Another case where DNS can really screw you and completely root a box for your security software because you didn't think through how DNS works to your whole point.
Yeah, and just kind of along the lines of the host file, actually, when I was an intern here at Highland, there was another intern that was really, really convincing me to not use Google and use Bing instead. So I changed the host record on the server and a DNS server to resolve anything Google to Bing for a week. And it was really, really annoying because you'd go to Google and Bing would pop up and the results would just be not good. And at the end of that, I just went back to using Google. But if you ever want to annoy people like that and you run a DNS server, just like change domains around so that they result in different things, and people will hate you. Anything else? Okay, well, thank you very much, and go home and explain to your kids how DNS works.
Slide deck. Did you do all the graphics yourself?
Hell no.
You have people for that.
Yeah, our designer is really, really good.
Yeah, I was like, that is a professionally looking done slide.
All right, to wrap up, we have some upcoming events to announce. There's our 4th pub night, which will be the last Tuesday of this month on the 24th. We'll be in Lizardville in Lakewood. I haven't been there myself, but I heard they have excellent beer, so I'm looking forward to that one. And Cleveland Walk Sport on the 21st at the Shaker Launch House. For more information, check meetup.com/ClevelandLogSport. If you're looking to get started in log sport, or if you're just curious, or if you already have experience, they get together every month to practice and discuss, and yeah, they have a good time. Before we go, I just really want to give props to Tom for not only showing what's bad with DNS, but how to fix it, how we can get it solved. Because we see a lot of these kinds of talks in conferences where people are like, oh, here are my hacks, here are my exploits, but how do we fix it? How do we solve the problem? How do we listen to our blue team and give them the tools to get our stuff, fixed up and correctly configured? So that's exactly what we need. And that's all I had. Thanks again for coming. We'll see you next time.